they target certain people. And they say they're the ones that are responsible for this. They're the ones. And just by targeting hatred and targeting fear and saying these people, and if we could do away with these people, if we could do away with this, then everything would be resolved. It's never been that way. That's never been the truth. But agents of chaos stir trouble like this. Hi, everybody. It's time for another archetype video. Today, I'm going to do the agitator archetype versus the inspired visionary, because I want to contrast these two. This is a season of agitators, and there's a reason for that, and I thought I would just kind of discuss that. You have to be blind not to see that there is, we are living in an epic time of transformation and change. And that brings out the agitator. And, if you look historically, whether you look at the Russian Revolution or the American Revolution, or you look at a time when a population wants to change its living condition from a repressed rule to a time of liberation, like when Gandhi came to power and challenged the rule of the British, when Nelson Mandela challenged apartheid. People like Gandhi, and well, let me back up and say, and this is kind of a big thing, but when we look at the conditions in our physical world, when we just look at the physical world, one of the mystical truths is that what we see and what we experience is like the caboose on the train. Creation, what we create is the engine. All that needs to be created is the engine of the train. What we experience has already been created, and that's the caboose, and that's what we respond to. But creation takes place in the non-physical world, etc. So if we think about what's in the caboose of our train, what we are experiencing is an incredible amount of chaos that's being created because our psychic atmosphere is filled with this incredible sense of chaos because we know our world is changing. And it's changing in ways that whenever epic eras of change happen, it always portends feelings of where are we going and what does it mean for me? And it brings out our base insecurities, survival insecurities, and wars erupt like they are erupting, and homelessness rises, and all kinds of everything that represents earth insecurities emerge. And it becomes an atmosphere that's ripe for the agitator to come up, to emerge, and to start trying to rile up, to take advantage of the fears in the atmosphere, to kind of gather that force and to harness it, and to harness the fear patterns that are generated by people who feel the most powerless and the most vulnerable among us. Um, the when you look back at people who were really the visionary agitators, and when I think of that, I think of people like Lenin, Vladimir Lenin, or Adolf Hitler, or Karl Rove, or Alex Jones. People who can smell this, and they feed the insecurities of the people, and they promise them. They start with conspiracies, and they constantly feed the atmosphere with this basic um, messages that tell people that everything can be solved just by doing this, just by listening to me, just by they target certain people. And they say they're the ones that are responsible for this. They're the ones. And just by targeting hatred and targeting fear and saying these people, and if we could do away with these people, if we could do away with this, then everything would be resolved. It's never been that way. That's never been the truth. But agents of chaos stir trouble like this. And they do it without actually someone like for example Lenin. He had a new government in mind. He had a target. So in his own way, he was a visionary. He wanted to get rid of the monarchy of Russia. He wanted to get rid of the Romanovs. He wanted to replace it with a government. So he had a vision in mind. He had a new government in mind. But make no mistake, he was an agent of chaos at the same time. He didn't care what was required to do it, a revolution. But at the same time, he did have a vision in mind, which is why the chaos did lead to another government, chaotic though it was. Gandhi had a vision in mind. He had a freedom for the Indian people, for the people of India. And this was accomplished because he had a higher vision in mind. But when agents of chaos, like an Alex Jones or a Karl Rove, that just simply want to bring down the system, just want to agitate conspiracies, just want to fill the atmosphere with lies, then what you have is like a blackout on truth that makes it very difficult for people to discern what is really going on or why things are really changing. I think it's very challenging for people to keep in mind a greater vision of what is happening in our world, and to think, how am I part of that greater vision? What is really going on here? It's very difficult to hold a huge vision in mind in your individual life and to think, how is all of this, how does it relate to me? How? And so what little I can contribute to this, I'm going to try here and just say, if you stood back and could see the whole for just a minute, for just a brief second, and say, is there a pattern to the dynamic of change that is unfolding in our world? Is there a pattern? To me, the pattern is, and I have to look, I look to ourselves. What is in one is in the whole. I look to what is taking place within the human body, within the human instrument, which is always an indicator to me that how we are changing as individuals tells me, in a sense, of how the world is changing, because we are the engines that are driving the whole. And what I've learned through the years is that the new model, the new dictate, the new template that is at work within us is very much that we need to become whole. We need to operate according to a template of holism. That requires a different way of thinking. That requires a tremendous amount of transformation within us. And let me say that I don't think we are going to accomplish that in our lifetime, or even in the, in the lifetime of the generations already born. But it is obvious that our technology is accomplishing that. Our technology moves us ever more toward holism with the internet, with the way in which we are technically involving ourselves with everybody on the globe. That our economy has become an increasingly more holistic, in that what happens in one country affects the economy of the whole. Our illnesses are becoming holistic. A pandemic is a holistic illness. It involves the whole. Climate change is a holistic challenge. So more and more we are getting the message that we are one whole integrated system of life, and that somehow we have to adjust to this new model, as difficult as that is. And that is going to change how we understand economics, how we understand politics, how we apply ourselves to problem solving, to recognizing that the way in which we've seen things, that there are only two solutions, right or wrong, good or bad, win or loser, is not a model that can be sustained any longer on this planet if we are to survive. That there are two sides, and one is obviously the winner, and one is obviously the loser. That this model of dualism is that the way to resolve things is to kill the other side, and that will solve things. That this model is no longer sustainable, especially in an era of nuclear weapons. That it still boggles my mind. It will always stop me in my thinking to think that we celebrate and think it's an accomplishment that we've created weapons that can destroy the only planet we have to live on. That we think that's a good thing. That we think that the way in which we can protect ourselves is to destroy other people with nuclear weapons, when the fallout is massive destruction to the entire planet. I mean, what is the matter with us? What is the matter with us? And now we have, I think it is exactly this vulnerability, this collective vulnerability, that has this challenge to holism, that really is, in an unconscious way in the collective, part of the root of the chaos that human beings are experiencing, because the borders of nations are no longer strong enough to keep problems parametered to nations. A border of a problem can't keep a pandemic into a nation. You can close the borders, but it doesn't stop the pandemic. You can close the borders, but it doesn't stop climate change. We no longer have, at the physical level, the solutions to the crises that are occurring at the psycho-spiritual, energetic level. We have entered the age of energy, and energy does not have boundaries. It has no boundaries. And so I think it is part of this unconscious realization that is causing a level of fear and realization that I don't think is conscious in terms of the whole, and yet I think it's given rise to a quality of agitators that manufacture fake news, that manufacture lies at an unprecedented level before, that we've never ever been exposed to at all. And at the same time, I think it is very difficult in this kind of atmosphere for inspired leaders to rise and counter this kind of world full of fraudulence and full of such unparalleled hatred. Every day in the news, we hear 3 Palestinian kids, students, shot. For what reason? We see these kinds of episodes of spontaneous hatred that just spring up everywhere. For what reason? For what reason? It is just like explosions of frustration, rage, hatred that accomplish nothing but to increase in the collective this sense that we are changing, but in the wrong direction. That instead of becoming more humane, instead of expanding our humanity, the agitators, the agents of chaos, are accomplishing the goal of generating more fear in people, of generating more, of going the wrong way. I mean, for decades now, we've been getting the message of becoming whole, holism, holistic health, integrated, beginning to understand that all of our systems work together, which means all the systems of life, which means all the systems of humanity are supposed to come together. You know, recently a friend of mine took a position in Washington that is funded, at least for now, by the government, and it is meant to begin the release of information on extraterrestrials, on their contact with us, on their presence on the earth, on their information, etc., that has been repressed by the government for decades. And now in December, there's a vote coming up in Congress, sponsored by the Speaker of the House and Mitch McConnell, to not fund this office, to in fact keep this information from the public. And again, this supports chaos. This supports the great, yet another lie, that we are alone in the universe, that in fact we are not on the brink of entering the global community, the galactic community, that we are alone in this vast ocean of creation. You know, I'm going to go down the road here, but your system, what I've learned as a medical intuitive, is that our system, our biospiritual ecology, as I now think of us, has a physical design, but you also have a biospiritual energetic design and a biospiritual energetic anatomy. Let me put it that way. And every level of your anatomy has requirements for its health. So your biology, its requirements for health are well known, right? You know what your body needs. But identifying what your emotional body needs, what your intellectual body needs, what your spiritual body needs. Now there you're in vulnerable territory, because we still rely upon laboratory experiments to decide what's real and what's not. So how do you do a laboratory experiment to measure what your emotions need, to measure, these silly things on your head and measuring in sleep? God, Jesus, Mary and Joseph, how primitive. And how do you measure what you need spiritually? How do you do that? Especially when, as soon as you get into a scientific laboratory, the idea of talking about the non-physical world and its presence and etc. becomes, you're in the world of skepticism. So to say to somebody, your health requires truth. You thrive on truth. And lies and deception, which is the specialty of agitators, and fake news, and people who thrive on that and deliver it. When you absorb lies and you feed that into your system, there is a mechanism in you, there's a mechanism in your soul that recognizes deception and lies. It recognizes it. And it counters it through your intuitive system. And it makes that known through your biospiritual mechanism. Simply put, just look at it in your personal life. If someone lies to you, you may not be able to prove it in the moment, but you feel it. Oh, yes, you do. You feel it. Because your entire system responds, and you feel it. Maybe you feel it in your gut. Maybe you feel it maybe you have a biospiritual temperature change. Maybe you feel it in your head. There's a throbbing that starts. But your whole system responds to the fact that you've just been delivered a lie. You respond. Maybe you can't prove it, but your system is telling you right off the bat, this is not truth. Don't swallow it. And if you're forced to accept something that's not truth, if you go along with it, you have to adjust so much in your biospiritual ecology. You have to write a narrative to talk yourself into it. And it can make you sick, and you know it can make you sick, because a lie makes you sick. It makes you sick. And if you tell lies, you have to adjust your conscience. You have to turn off the mechanism, the metronome in you that was activated from the time you were 7. This is right, this is wrong, this is truth, this is lies. You have to adjust that mechanism to not work, And your entire intuitive system relies upon that mechanism. It relies upon that gut instinct that starts off as your conscience. It says, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. Now this system is so sensitive, and it responds instantaneously to truth, lies, deception, and it is a phenomenal protective system. Phenomenal. I could teach you forever how unbelievable this system is. And if I were to write a book on health now, I would begin by saying that the base for so much depression, self-hatred, self-loathing begins by the destruction of one's conscience, one's metronome, one's inner mechanism that's meant to guide you from the get-go, and how compromised it is in so many people. And in order to deal with that compromise, you have to find someone to blame, because you have to think, I'm filled with deception, and it can't be my fault, so it must be that person's fault. And what makes living with compromise, the compromised self, tolerable, not easy, but tolerable, is finding external enemies. Finding external enemies. Got to be that fault, that fault. That's why Trump rallies are so effective for people, because he riles up hatred. And when that hatred comes out, he says it's this fault, it's that fault, it's the government's fault, it's this, or that, blah, blah, blah. All the hatred this demon generates. And people, that's right, that's right. They feel like they've been healed. They absolutely feel vindicated. They feel like they've been healed, and it's a dark healing. It's called dark healing. It's a dark mechanism. That's what agitators do. They get the darkness out, and it feels like light. And they feel like, oh. But that's why they always have to cling together, stay together, because they need that. They need that because they've broken their mechanism. They've broken that capacity to discern the truth. That's what happens in a cult. That's why when you talk to a cult person and you try to say, Jim Jones, anybody, don't you get this person's a crazy person? No, they don't. No, it's too late, because the mechanism's gone. It's completely off kilter. And that's what we're living in now, is this time where the collective mechanism has been toyed with for so long and fed so much for years. We've sat back and said, oh yeah, all these people are lying to us and da 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 da, and we haven't fought back. We haven't said, I'm not listening to these lies anymore. Fox News, I'm not listening to these lies anymore. Instead, we just, maybe. Instead of saying, wait a minute here. I don't want to be lied to anymore. I've got to re-engage my mechanism. I'm not listening to these agitators. That's an agitator. I've got to face the fact that maybe I'm afraid of survival somehow, but this is an evolutionary plan. This isn't what's happening in the world. Isn't due to these people or that people. It's due to a larger evolutionary plan that has to do with holism, that has to do with moving us toward becoming a whole humanity. And we're fighting it every step of the way. I urge you, really, to take a look at how your body works. Just take a look at how your body works, and how your body is much more vibrant and healthy when it works as a whole system. And just go with that. And just tell yourself, do you work better when you feel whole or fractured? And if you work better feeling whole, then you have to take that template and assume that that's also true for the world. What is in one is in the whole. That's a mystical truth, and you can't argue with it. And the choice is, can you live by that template? Can you then make your decisions that say, I have to start thinking and making my decisions to be more inclusive of the whole, to challenge myself when I think and judge others, how I see the world, how I work in the world, how I am in the world. Because what you do, matters more than you will ever, ever know. What is in one is in the whole, and what is in the whole goes into your one. Thank you, everybody.